Thank you, and a very good morning to one and all. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to address this plenary session on the second day of the 2018 Responsible Business Forum. The convening of this forum this week could not have been more timely. It is being held just a few days after the adoption of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Special Report on Global Warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which highlighted the grave impacts of climate change if we continue with our business as usual approach. If you haven't read the report yet, I invite you to do so. It is a very insightful report. If you want to read just a summary of the report, you can read Friday's edition of The Economist. There is a write-up on the leaders section of The Economist. It will give you a gist of its key recommendations. One of the key findings of the IPCC special report is that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees can go hand in hand with global efforts to eradicate poverty and pursue sustainable development, which is a theme of this conference. I would therefore like to thank Global Initiatives for organizing this forum, as it brings together people from different backgrounds, governments, businesses, civil society, international organizations, to generate practical ideas and solutions on how we can all work to achieve sustainable development for the benefit of our peoples. I'm pleased to note that the organizers have dedicated an entire plenary session to this critical issue of climate change, which is reflective of the importance they have attached to this very important issue when discussing the broader issue of sustainable development goals. It is clear that climate change can undermine our efforts to achieve sustainable development. The findings of the latest IPCC report showed that an additional half degree of warming, just half degree, could have a significant impact on many countries, especially for small island states like Singapore. Indeed, we are already feeling its impacts. According to the World Meteorological Organization, 2017 was the second hottest year on record, with 2016 remaining as the hottest year. 2017 was also the warmest non-El Nino year. The extreme temperatures have resulted in localized extreme weather events across the globe. Our region was not spared. Devastating floods across South Asia in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. Typhoons in China, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Torrential rain and landslides in Japan. And the calamitous earthquakes and tsunami in Indonesia. As we speak, Hurricane Michael is also making its impact in the east coast of the United States. What is clear is that developed and developing countries are both feeling its impacts. These disasters have not only claimed lives, they have rolled back years of development and progress. More frequent extreme weather events may also lead to volatile global food prices and disruptions to business supply chains. The good news is that the international community is coming together to address climate change and broader environmental issues. In 2015, world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and I note many of you are wearing this badge. Hopefully, we can all work to support its goals. And later in the year of 2015, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. A year later, in 2016, in Kigali, the amendment to the Montreal Protocol to phase down another group of greenhouse gases, HFCs, was adopted. These agreements are universally applicable and were adopted with unprecedented sense of ownership by UN member states. While the climate change negotiations have not been all smooth sailing, many countries are currently working hard to implement the Paris Agreement, which aims to limit global warming increase to well below 2 degrees Celsius. To date, 177 countries have submitted pledges to take actions. Parties are also currently working hard to finalize the rulebook for the Paris Agreement. The rulebook will facilitate the implementation of the agreement in a transparent and clear way and will put in place processes to encourage ambition over time. While we are making progress in addressing climate change, we still have much to do. The pledges received under the Paris Agreement are insufficient to keep global temperature rise under 1.5 degrees Celsius. According to the latest IPCC special report, global temperature rise of 1.5 degrees could be reached in as little as 11 years without major cuts in carbon emissions. The multilateral rule-based system of cooperation to address climate change and environment is also under strain. A global issue like climate change requires a global response. Clearly, all countries would need to step up and strengthen their resolve and commitment to support the multilateral system of governance and cooperation in addressing climate change. Now, as a small city-state that is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, Singapore is fully committed to supporting global action on climate change. Nationally, we are taking ambitious actions. First, we have pledged to reduce our emission intensity by 36% from 2005 levels by 2030 and stabilize our emissions with the aim of peaking around 2030. This is a challenging target given our limited access to alternative sources of clean energy. We will also be the first country in Southeast Asia to implement an economy-wide carbon tax, which will come into effect in as little as 2 or 3 months, 1st January 2019. The carbon tax, which is applied uniformly to all sectors without exemption, will encourage companies to price in the cost of externalities and spur the adoption of innovative, eco-friendly solutions. Although we are starting with a low tax rate of 5 Singapore dollars per ton CO2 carbon, the tax will be reviewed by 2023 with the intention of increasing it 2 or 3 times by 2030. The review will take into account international climate change developments, progress of our emission mitigation efforts, and our economic competitiveness. But the government is prepared to channel the revenue generated from the tax to help companies and industry improve their energy efficiency during this transition period. Regionally, we are also working to drive regional climate action as chairman of ASEAN. We convened the special ASEAN Ministerial meeting on climate action we call it SAMCA. For many of you who know Singapore so far, we use a lot of acronyms. So we convened this meeting called the SAMCA, Special ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Climate Action, and an expanded SAMCA, which involved not only ASEAN countries, but our +3 partners, China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. Also present were the presidencies of the UNFCCC, Patricia Espinosa as well, the executive secretary, and they were all present. And what was important about that meeting was countries, ASEAN, the +3, came together, they shared their climate action plans, and most importantly, reaffirmed their commitment to take action and to help each other to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Another initiative of ours is mayors and governors from ASEAN capitals came together and they signed up to the Singapore Declaration on Environment Sustainability. Now, this declaration is significant because, one, it was signed outside the formal ASEAN structured process. Second, it was not the usual G2G agreement. It was an agreement among mayors. And thirdly, it brought cities in ASEAN to act together. So the key point is outside the ASEAN framework, you have mayors at the city level now coming together to take action. Finally, we also launched other initiatives such as the ASEAN Smart City Network. And I know there are parallel sessions on urbanization also during this session. Now, this ASEAN Smart Cities Network is a collaborative forum where ASEAN member states will work towards the common goal of smart and sustainable urban development with the use of technology as an enabler to improve the lives of our citizens. Since its launch, I'm pleased to say that 26 cities from all 10 ASEAN countries have been named as pilot cities and are already rolling up their sleeves and getting to work to develop action plans specific to their cities. Now, internationally, Singapore is also a keen advocate of a multilateral rules-based approach to addressing climate change. Singapore was one of the first 55 countries to ratify the Paris Agreement, thereby contributing to its early entry into force on 4th November 2016. We are committed to the universal and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. We are also committed to sharing experiences and supporting fellow developing countries in their efforts to address climate change. In this regard, Singapore has launched a climate action package in July this year to develop capacity in developing countries in key areas such as disaster risk reduction, green finance, climate science, and long-term mitigation and adaptation strategies. Since 1992, we have worked with almost 120,000 officials from developing countries to build capacity in key areas such as sustainable development under our Singapore Cooperation Program. Now, all these efforts will come to naught if we don't have the support of the whole nation. Governments alone cannot solve climate change. To effectively address climate change, we need all stakeholders, businesses, civil society organizations, and individuals to come and work together. To galvanize ground-up action, the government has designated 2018 as the year of climate action. To date, we have received more than 300,000 pledges, including more than 400 pledges from businesses, and close to 40 pledges from civil society, and more than 300 pledges from educational institutions. I would therefore like to encourage all of you present here to join us in our whole-of-nation drive to address climate change. As the UNDP administrator said yesterday during the opening plenary, and I quote, "We should be bold, take it personally, and not be spectators." So here are some practical steps that you can take to get involved. First, make a pledge. For those who have not done so, do visit our webpage. You can just Ministry of Environment, Water Resources, MEWR, Google it, go to the Climate Action Pledge page, and make your pledge. It is not onerous. The pledge can take the form of simple tasks like switching off the lights when not in use, or taking the train to work instead of driving. No action is too small. Every action counts. Second, for businesses, make a concerted effort to improve energy efficiency of your operation and save costs. The government will support you in this drive through various incentive schemes and grants. For example, the National Environment Agency, the NEA for short, administers a suite of incentive schemes to help companies overcome financial barriers for energy-efficient investments. Again, go to NEA, National Environment Agency.gov.sg. That's the website where you can find all the various incentive schemes. One example of such a scheme is the Energy Efficiency Fund for Energy Assessment, where NEA co-funds up to 50% of the costs of energy audits in existing facilities. Third, invest in clean technology and green solutions. Where applicable, you can tap on the R&D grants offered by the government. For example, under the Singapore's Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2020 plan, 900 million in funding will be channeled into urban solutions and sustainability programs to support the piloting and test bedding and adoption of new technologies. In a carbon-constrained world, companies that take a forward-looking approach to create competitive advantage through green solutions will be well-placed to reap dividends in the future. Fourth, adopt environmental, social, and governance indicators, ESG, in your financial reporting. The Singapore Exchange announced the launch of SGX, Singapore Exchange, Sustainability Index in 2016. The indices aim to provide a transparent avenue through which investors can access the sustainability practices of SGX-listed companies. As investors and consumers become more discerning in their investment and consumer choices, companies using ESG indicators can distinguish themselves as ESG leaders in Singapore and have a competitive edge over their non-ESG peers. Consumers are increasingly holding business accountable, and demand for sustainability sourced products will continue to rise. Businesses would need to take these trends into account and move clearly to stay ahead of the competition. Fifth, be an advocate and pursue ground-up initiatives. Since the launch of the Year of Climate Action, we have seen a number of successful ground-up initiatives from our partners to inspire greater climate action. Some examples include the Singapore Environment Council's Eco Life SG app, Eco ECO Life SG app. For those of you who haven't installed it, I invite you to do so. It's a very interesting app because it allows you, individuals, organizations, to track their carbon footprint estimates. Sometimes you don't know how much CO2 emissions you use until you see for yourself. This is just one example of a ground-up initiative. I'm told my time is up. I will not cite the other two examples. So the conclusion is this. There is no doubt that climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing humanity today. As with any challenge, we can also turn it into an opportunity if we do the right thing. As the IPCC report has pointed out, capping rising temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius is excruciatingly difficult, but not impossible. We each have to play our part. I would therefore like to call upon every one of you here to work together, maintain the momentum on climate action so that we can respond to the challenges of climate nation as one nation and realize the vision of Singapore as a climate-resilient global city poised for green growth. And I thank you for your patience, and I apologize for exceeding.